Starmer there speaking in London. The main thrust, if you like, of what he said there, particularly at the end there, about him being attacked by some for not joining the offensive, but that he stood by his principles and any decision to join or send British military forces would be on a calm assessment and it must be a legal basis through a proper thought-out plan. Well, let's analyse it then. Angela Diffley, our international affairs editor, is with me. Angela, very much, particularly at the end of that, Keir Starmer really defending his record over the last few weeks because he's been attacked from many sides for not getting more involved, hasn't he?
Absolutely. You know, we must remind our listeners and viewers, he is the head of a Labour government. He has been attacked from all sides, as you say. He flip-flopped a bit at the beginning of this war. You know, Trump asked to use British bases in the Indian Ocean, and Starmer said no. He was roundly criticised for that on the right of the British parliamentary spectrum. Then he changed a little and said, OK, you can use our base in the Indian Ocean for defensive purposes, and it has been used since then. Then afterwards, Trump said, look, don't offer your help now. This war is won. We don't need you. Well, look how things have changed. Now, Donald Trump asking openly for help on the Strait of Hormuz, asking several countries to come in and help the US open the Strait of Hormuz. No easy job that. You know, Keir Starmer is in a very difficult position. His Labour voters would be appalled at the idea of Britain being on the same side as Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. A lot of his Labour voters have been very, very agitated already by the war in Gaza. It would be extremely difficult for him to commit to that. Also, he is, above all, and he's often criticised for being too much of a lawyer, not enough of a politician. He is a lawyer. He always looks at the legal basis. And as he said very clearly there at the end, it's not clear what this war is about. I'm not committing our soldiers to it until there is a clear objective and a clear goal. And I'm convinced that it is legal. And therefore, he stands by his decision, and it looks very much as if he is not going to heed Donald Trump's call to help out by trying to help reopen the Straits of Hormuz. One of his ministers said this morning, let's be very clear, this is not a NATO war, because, of course, Donald Trump has been saying, you know, this will be very bad news for NATO if NATO members don't help us out. NATO, the Minister for Work and Pensions, was reminding people, was set up so that if one nation is attacked, a NATO nation, then all of the others can be called upon to help. But it was not, he said, set up for a situation where one NATO member might choose to go to war and then that the others might be obligated to help. So this is very bad news for NATO. I don't know how Mark Rutte is going to spin all of this. It's very difficult. Britain coming out very firmly saying that within the EU, with EU members, that it is part of a collective. They're looking at ways to help out, but no yes to Donald Trump.
It was interesting, wasn't it, though? He did say that the Strait of Hormuz has to be reopened. He talked about working with allies to put together a collective plan. It sounds very much like there's no military involvement in that plan. It'd be interesting to see what they might be considering, I suppose.
Well, nobody seems to have any good solutions to this. Even the idea of the military one is very difficult to pull off. He talked about doing that with EU allies. It's very unclear what is meant by that at all. A collective that might find other ways of getting around the problem of the Straits of Hormuz. It might be that Iran makes very clear that those who it considers friendly nations can go through the Strait of Hormuz, and those that it considers unfriendly nations cannot go through the Strait of Hormuz. You know, where is the European Union? Where is Britain going to be on all of that? This thing is getting messier and messier. Astonishing, again, that it seems Washington didn't think all of this through beforehand, because with all the gigantic military firepower that Washington has, that Israel has, you know, a few divers, a few speedboats can put mines on the bottom of very, very hefty ships and cause havoc.
And finally, Angela, I mean, most of what he said there was very much for an international audience, but also there was that very domestic audience that he was obviously trying to talk to, came up with that phrase about helping working people a lot. And although a lot of the measures that he announced apply only to the UK, they're the kind of measures, aren't they, that countries right around the world are going to be looking at to try and support and help people in their own individual countries.
Yeah, some of them were quite long-term, again, talking about we must invest more and more in green energy. We must not allow ourselves to be dependent on oil coming from certain parts of the world. We must not be over-reliant on particular suppliers, even if we take oil. A lot of long-term measures and some specific measures to help the UK population who, again, there's been a lot of criticism on the right in Britain, people saying that since COVID, people expect protection from everything and that it is not the government's job to borrow money or to in order to help people every time something like this happens. But Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister. He is facing, again, a lot of complaint about the mounting energy prices. He is already a very beleaguered Prime Minister, attacked both on the left and the right in Britain. And although he had a very, very huge majority when he was elected just not even 2 years ago, each of those seats in many cases was won on a very thin margin. And so many of his politicians, his parliamentarians, worry that they will lose their seats because Labour promised different things to different people and is having difficulty delivering.